May the force be with you is a phrase used to wish a person well to overcome a challenge. The invitation in this podcast, May the life force be with you, is to explore what it means to truly feel alive, to appreciate the physical, emotional and spiritual connection to our energy, and finally to understand how this impacts who you are and all that you do. May this conversation inspire you to thrive.
Alive is an online course that helps you to reveal, meet and heal the patterns that cause you to lose your most precious resource, your life force energy. So if you're tired of feeling tired, visit starlight-temple.com/alive and use the code podcast to get a half-price discount on this process that aligns you into aliveness.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition or episode of May the Life Force be with you. And before Karila introduces our guest today, I'd just like to take a little moment just to, take a deep breath. Feels like everyone's been rushing around after the eclipse window or still letting all the dust settle. So I just set the intention for this episode for you to take what resonates most and to use this time and space to really ask, how's my life force today?
Thank you so much, Fiona. I really felt that intention land in my life force energy. And I liked the invitation to be a bit less busy as well. And I'm really excited to be welcoming Nick Watson onto May the Life Force be with you. He is a mushroom enthusiast, a shamanic practitioner, and a yoga teacher. And I am very, very lucky to have shared healing journeys and experiences and received healing from him. Every time we've ever had a conversation, it's been very, very inspirational. So I'm very excited he is here for this conversation. Hi, Nick. How are you doing? How's your life, boss?
Yeah, thanks so much. That's such a beautiful introduction. I appreciate it, especially coming from you, who I know quite well now. So it feels like a very special compliment. My life force is good. Yeah, generally speaking, I've been really enjoying the spring energy, like getting lots of things going, huge transitions going on as well. Busy, very busy. But kind of in the good sense, and also like learning to really enjoy the busyness because I had such a yin winter. I started taking my own advice and going like actually relaxing in winter and going internal and slowing right down. So
I was just going to ask you, are you a hibernator by default? Is that your usual winter energy?
No, I'm not like a winter. I'm not really suited to the England climate, as we were mentioning a moment ago off air. I'm like more of a kind of beach boy myself, but I find myself here. And this last couple of winters, I've been living in like rural Dartmoor, like kind of not completely off grid, but kind of semi off grid at the end of this like single track lane, which just gets like narrower and narrower and narrower. And then like backs out onto the moorland, but like there's different like parts of moorland. You kind of got like forests and rivers, but this is like the gorse moorland. It's just bare and open, and so that was like my winter was there. It's kind of like quite harsh, huge rains coming in, and kind of amazing.
I have to ask why, if you're from the heart, why on earth would you do that to yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm beginning to question that myself, really. I don't know if that was just the extra motivation I needed to get myself back to a sunnier country, but me and my lovely partner were talking about maybe trying to make something of it, maybe in like Spain or France or Portugal or something like that eventually. I moved back. I was in Sydney for 4 years, so I moved back to the UK about 4 years ago. And I've been loving it, don't get me wrong, but part of me is like, I can choose anywhere to live. And I love the sun, I love the beach. And I love the mountains and the forest, and there's some really epic places kind of down that Atlantic coast. So who knows, like, for the moment I'm here and I'm loving it, and like Devon's like my home and it's beautiful, and like to any of like the
I
English.
do think Dartmoor, though, there is something about Dartmoor where the weather like literally seems to like pound you. Like Dartmoor, just it's so weather beaten.
Yeah,
More than
Harsh environment.
places in the UK.
yeah, I don't know if that's to do maybe with. So Dartmoor's so special, right? I don't know if either of you have visited it, but like the energy is
There's so many sacred circles on Dartmoor. Like it's
unbelievable.
like there's like 24 or something like that just in Dartmoor alone, isn't there?
Yeah, and
Stone circle.
springs, and just like it's a place of magic almost wherever you go. Like sadly, like it's been hugely deforested, and so now it's a national park and it's been preserved. But if you start going back through the ages, and we're sort of going back to maybe like kind of like Roman era, pre-Roman era, that's when the deforestation started. But you get to like this point in time where it was just a huge kind of like primarily oak, but with other trees as well, this huge like forest essentially. And so our ancestors would have been wandering through these like old ancient forests to find these huge stone tors, they're called, like cropping out, and then probably would have come above the canopy, and then they would have seen out, you know, across this like huge like oasis of forest basically. And you can still find like little parts of that and realize just how special it was. And so there's like some parts of the forest which are hugely like diverse, but yeah, like some of it's still got that energy, but like with a different sort of like different
Landscape.
landscape. Yeah, exactly.
The energy, it's interesting you say about the energy though, because like I haven't spent that much time in Dartmoor, but like like the energy is so strong there. It feels like just like a magical, I don't know, you can feel the magic of that land whenever I go. I'm like it's vibrating. with ancient English magic is what I would describe it, you know, that real druidy ancient wizardy, probably quite haunted kind of place.
Yeah, there's definitely something. I mean, anybody who spends any time there realizes it quite quickly. Like, it's inspired for me. It's like quite like inspiring. You know, there's like a sense of awe to it and a sense of wonder, even though like you might just be looking out at like marshland, but there's this like magnificence to it, the way it presents itself. And I mean, anyone who's traveled this area will know there's so many sacred sites, like you said, and you've got like Tintagel, which has got like very heavily connected to all the Arthurian legends.
Which I'm right by. I might point out, I'm right by Tintagel right now.
Of course, aren't you?
Like I'm literally like round the corner from Tintagel.
Does that
And
mean
it actually makes me laugh. Go on.
there's a waterfall there? I forget the name of.
Yeah, I was there at it today.
You went there today?
I was at St Nectar's Glen today. Like that's why I'm here, is to go to St Nectar's Glen 3 days in a row. And I want to say I got in, I was in my knickers, getting wet and cold in the waterfall. And I was actually thinking, because I want to ask you about being a mushroom enthusiast. And I was thinking about the last time I was here. The last time I was here was for a friend's birthday last summer, and we went to the Glen. But we also, my other friend who's never taken mushrooms before told me that she was giving me a microdose, and she totally like did not give me a microdose, and we both just had this like she spiked me by mistake. So we both had this like unplanned mushroom trip because she didn't know what she was doing. And I was like, that's really funny that I'm back at St Nectar's Glen and we're about to talk to Nick about being a mushroom enthusiast. And what I'd say is, like, we've suddenly started talking about mushrooms on May the Life Force Be With You. It's like they've suddenly decided that they have stuff to say about life force energy, and they've come onto the show. And so, yeah, I wanted to ask about, what does it mean to be a mushroom enthusiast?
Well, I've got like a few things I want to say in relation to that. First of all, just with the whole thing of like a microdose. A microdose varies from person to person quite greatly. And so like some people, if you take like a typical like psilocybin mushroom, like some people might take 0.1 as a microdose, and others like might have quite a strong experience from the same dose. So it really does depend on the person. Like the bell, about the bell curve chart. Like most people aren't super sensitive, but some people are. And this is something I've come to realize, is like some people just need to pick like one or two of them, and others need to eat them by the handful, and they get like the same level of effects. So I don't know if it was an accident.
So this was somebody not knowing what they're doing with mushrooms. Like our friend, she's a friend of Fiona's as well. Our friend and another friend of ours gave our friend some leftover mushrooms, and the person that gave me the microdose just didn't. What happened was, she was like, shall I put the mushrooms in the cacao? And I was like, no, because I don't want to trip. And she was like, well, why not? And I was like, because I don't know where they're from. I don't know how strong they are. I don't know. Like, I don't want to trip. Like, I don't know anything about these. And she was like, that's a really good point, because she's never done anything before. Like, she never even did drugs when she was young. So she messaged our friend and was like, how much should I use? And our friend was like, it'll probably do nothing for you. It's just the dregs. But she then translated that back to me by saying it's a microdose. And I was like, well, if it's a microdose, I'll have it. Whereas like, it wasn't a microdose. Like, it wasn't. It was a full, strong dreg dose. And so like, there was just cross wires with somebody not knowing the language of what a microdose means, translating what somebody else had said into the language that she thought was right, and basically spiked. And it's so funny because she's like the most angelic person in my life. And I'm like, I can't believe you spiked me. Like, you were the last person I know I ever thought would have roofied me. Like, we were sitting in this campsite, everyone went out, and like about half an hour into it, I was like, this is not a microdose. And because she hasn't taken anything before, she was like, isn't it? I was like, how do you not know? We are like coming up really hard right now. But yeah, then we had loads of fun, and it was brilliant because I never ever take these things recreationally. I only take them medicinally, and not very often. And so it was like super fun because it was like the waterfall, which is fairy waterfall, like totally. It felt like the mushrooms were like, come on, have some fun. Like, you don't always have to take medicine. Sometimes
fairies happened. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Got involved.
Yeah. And it was like, you could just have fun. Go on. I'm going to spike you with some fun. So.
Good word to use from, actually, because I think what got me into the mushroom world initially was just, I find them like the most joyful little creature there is in the forest. And so for like your listeners who maybe don't know much about mushroom, right? Everybody sort of knows the bit of mushroom that you might find, right? And that's what we call the fruiting body, which is with the stem and the cap. But the mushroom is actually a mycelial web which exists underneath the soil. So it's like a root network, if you will. And that little mushroom body it's almost like the apple. It's like a reproductive organ. So it just comes up to that little window and then obviously releases its spores so that it can kind of like spread itself and find kind of reproduce. So what I'm searching for. But a few years ago, I was just walking. I don't know, like mushrooms just kind of like it piqued my interest, right? You know, sometimes you get these like moments of inspiration, and it's like they don't come from anywhere necessarily, and there was no conscious thought. But I think I was perhaps living on a rewilding farm, and a mushroom guy came in, and we went and did a mushroom walk, and then my now partner was there as well, and we just really ended up getting into the world of like just looking for these little creatures and finding them in the forest and the different shapes and the sizes, and there was not much known about them as well. So I'm like, here we have, like, for me, what feels like the most joyful expression of autumn, and nobody knows anything about them, and it's kind of like this big mystery, and there's this huge polarity, whereas, you know, you can eat some of them and they tell you like, oh, just let go a little, like, but then you eat another one and it's like, you know, on the extreme end, like, you're gonna die. And so, like, from there, like, my interest only like fascinated when I find out more and more things about like what they're capable of, and then you can fall down. Then I started falling down into all the rabbit holes, you know, like the Terence McKenna related rabbit holes and the Paul Stamets.
No, what's that? Tell us what that is.
Right. So, I mean, where to even start, really? Like, there's quite a lot to cover. But Terence McKenna is essentially kind of considered maybe like a god among people who like magic mushrooms, and he was this very kind of like interesting, maybe slightly eccentric character who came out of the States and would do huge lectures, and would basically take a lot psilocybin mushrooms and then talk about his experiences and his realizations about life and stuff like this. But he has a very kind of like very maybe both interesting but also kind of like individual and articulate way of speaking, which makes him quite an engaging person to listen to. But he has a number of beautiful one-liners, my favorite being the mushrooms told me nobody knows jack shit about what's going on, which whenever I like listen to something, I'm like, I don't resonate with that, or if I'm confused in my own head, I just come back to that almost like a mantra, like, nobody knows, it's okay.
But I feel like the only beings that might know are the mushrooms. Like, I feel like the fungi kingdom actually rule this planet.
Yeah, I would agree with you in that.
That's why I'm like, it isn't an accident that, like, you know, like, I feel like they don't do things by accident. They're like this network that is actually controlling what is alive and what isn't alive on this planet. Do you know what I mean?
I think that specific comment was made in reference to, he was talking about all these religious men and gurus, and everybody like says all this stuff, and the mushrooms were like, no, humans don't have a clue. I think was the context. And you can sort of believe it when you start like spending time with them. You're like, okay, maybe like they feel like, I was going to use the word wisdom keepers. They feel like wisdom keepers to me. They've been around, like, if you take a look at like, if you follow sort of like the standard model of the world, you know, like, I know there's particularly maybe among your listeners, there's maybe a bit of a broader range of beliefs out there, but they've been around for a long, long time, and they've been like kind of controlling things for a long, long time and making sure that equilibrium. And you've got these huge mass extinction events, you know, like you create like these awesome dinosaurs and, you know, like huge predators, and it's like, they're gone. But the mushrooms were around back then, and they still are now.
And do you have an opinion on why? Why is it that mushrooms have survived the dinosaurs and the apocalypses, and what is it about mushrooms that mean they're kind of invincible here, right? Like,
yeah, it's not something I've considered, but perhaps like off the cuff, and from the things that I've learned is like, and the things I've learned specifically with mushrooms is like, they're a really or at least it's my understanding, of a very like egalitarian species. So they're not kind of like a species out for themselves, so to speak. They're a species which are kind of coming into partnership with everything and everything around it. So you have, like, as an example, a great example is, you know, the Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric, the red and white mushroom, right? Now you find
the famous one, yeah.
find that mushroom in forests, but you won't find it in the middle of a grassy field. And the reason is that creates what's called a mycorrhizal partnership. And basically what that means is that the mycelium from the mushroom has to bind itself with the mycelium from a tree in order for it to be able to grow. So it's from the moment it's born, it's actually part of a partnership. And what you see like in the mushroom world is like it is essentially they are partnerships. Not always, there's obviously outliers to everything, but what they do is they create partnerships and chains of communication.
And can you just clarify for people that don't know what mycelium is? So what is the mycelium of the tree and the mushroom?
So when I say mycelium is basically refers to is actually the mushroom. So the mushroom is a root network underneath the soil. And so we should probably get into a little bit about soil health, but remind me a bit later down the line, because I'll probably go off on a huge tangent before. But essentially, like underneath the soil, wherever you go, and in most trees probably, and just all around you, right? Like there are networks of mushrooms, and it's called mycelium. And just think of roots, basically. But mycelium, they work in a slightly different way. And so when I talk about mushrooms, everybody obviously thinks about what I said earlier, the fruiting body. But really, that's just the apple of the mushroom. And the mushroom subsists underneath the soil. So they live in the soil, and they basically... I'll explain to you a bit about how it works, right? So a spore is essentially like the seed of a mushroom, if you will, and that lands on the ground. And then from that, you get what's called a hyphal tip, which is like a root, right? And the root comes out and it begins to bury, and then it finds a food source. And then when it starts feeding on that food source, it sends more roots out, and they search, and they sort of search sometimes in rings, and they search and they grow out and they create more root networks, and then they sometimes meet other mycelium or other root networks of the same mushroom, and sometimes they'll be compatible, sometimes not, sometimes they'll mate, and they basically subsist under the soil. So they're just growing outwards, searching. They're the great recyclers, if you will. So when all these trees and things fall, all these leaves and trees and everything falls, like something has to like break that up. And I apologize to any of your viewers if I've understood this wrong, but my understanding is that like at one stage there wasn't mycelium decomposting trees, right? So you had these huge tree networks, and they were just falling, and trees were just falling on top of each other, and then it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually the mycelium came in and began to eat and decompose all these trees, and that's where you get all of these natural gases and oils from and stuff like that. It's like that's why there's reserves of it, is because it built up so big.
It just has so many special powers, and when you're saying about kind of eating up that helping with the decomposing process, I read about how they can actually decompose nuclear waste. So the one thing that thrives in Chernobyl is the mushroom network, because they are able to absorb that nuclear waste. They can take in that kind of, they can survive in that toxic environment. So it's actually helping clear the Chernobyl area. And I believe as well it can also be used like in ocean waste as well. There's certain type of fungi that can exist and can help decompose like plastics and materials that are found in the ocean as well. So their decomposition powers are pretty huge, in that they can naturally clear so much of the bad stuff from our soil, our oceans, and air as well, which is, they're phenomenal things that I don't think are given enough power in the animal and plant kingdom. I feel like they get overlooked a lot in terms of their importance to nature's flow.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think part of that might be a hangover from the burning maybe of the witches and the sort of wise men of the Druids. Because the Victorians, I believe, were kind of quite anti-mushrooms, and they lost all the knowledge, and then they tried to experiment. I'm like, what do these things actually do? And they would have people eat mushrooms, and then they would just watch them. And, sometimes they might go off to like a fairyland, but then sort of no one did any sort of research. But you're right. They're like, I was thinking about this the other day before coming onto this podcast, like what is the life force in the mushrooms, and like what are they doing? And I thought like they're the great transmuters, in the sense, like you say, they can take nuclear waste and actually like clean it up.
That is living alchemy. Like, they are the alchemists. Like, to turn shit into gold is alchemy, right? You know, but like they are the alchemists, you know, like there is no problem too big for them. It's like nuclear waste. Here we go. It's amazing.
Right. And so like this idea of like life force, like we might see, you know, like if somebody dies, we might go like, well, they've got no life force, the life force left them. But the mushroom doesn't look at it like that. The mushroom's like, oh, look at all that potential there. Let's get in and break that down, and we'll redistribute all of that life force across our mycelial network. And so they're seeing like an opportunity where we might see like death and destruction, which I found was it's kind of interesting, you know, like, because I think sometimes people can be perhaps not see it in that sort of way, you know, they can see it like, oh, they eat
Not
the dead.
perceiving the gold within the like, what I'm seeing is that it's like almost like this perception of the energy within everything, you know, within anything is part of that alchemy, I think. I mean, it was interesting because I was at the waterfall today, and you know, we've talked a lot, may the life force be with you, about kind of plant consciousness and fairy consciousness, which is the name that I use for plant consciousness. And one of the things that the spirits of the waterfall were saying to me is, they were like, if you want to understand fairy magic or plant magic, you have to understand that our power is always requited. So our power, like whatever we power out, we also get back in equal force. And why that feels really relevant is because as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, it's like when the mushrooms are going into like a corpse of a tree or a person or a fruit, whatever they're going into, they're like cleaning up, and at the same time they're getting all of their energy simultaneously, you know, like they're in two-way flow, so they're sending all of their energy through the act of service that they're doing, through the power that they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And like, I think specifically with mushrooms, for me, like I had a conversation with a guy, and I was saying like a bit like how you guys, you two started off, where you were saying like maybe they're kind of like running the planet, or they're like the ultimate intelligence. And someone was arguing, oh, well, you could say the same about like bacteria as an example. But for me, where mushrooms differ is they're like actively, if you look at like any form of life, they're actively transmuting, changing, and kind of like shaping the world as we know it. But they just don't seem to have the credit associated, even if you look at like human consciousness. So if you go back to like this fascinating book, and he basically realized that if you go back to the ancient mystery schools of, you know, like the Greek mystery schools, where they drank this thing called kukion, I think perhaps pronouncing that wrong, but essentially that was a psychedelic drink made of a fungus which grows on, it's called ergot. It's what they synthesize LSD from, but it grows on wheat. And then he like, all throughout the ages, you can see like these, particularly like the early ages, before there's pictures of, sorry, I'm jumping around here, but basically before there's any pictures of like warfare, there's like cave work of like mushrooms. Right, it's like one of the earliest pictures that they see is like these pictures of mushrooms. And so this guy traced this this drink back all the way to, well, conventional historians believe to be the birth of civilization, right, which is this place called Göbekli Tepe, which is around 12,000 years ago. He didn't find any specific traces of ergot there, but he found enough evidence to link ergot to the site. But he made this amazing case, and I love this so much, but he reckons that there's potential that the agricultural revolution was begun by humans' desire to farm ergot to make psychedelic beer rather than bread, and that bread was like a side a side, what would you call it, like a side hustle or a byproduct, if you will.
What we were talking about last night was Göbekli Tepe, this sacred site in Turkey. It's kind of thrown history out because it predates farming. And so it's kind of, the whole of human history that's like human evolution began with farming is like this thing that throws that out because the site existed before the farming.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And so it makes sense that like it wasn't about farming, it was about creation of consciousness or development of mushroom, and of course the mushroom started it because the mushrooms rule the world. I am starting to wonder if the mushrooms created human beings to produce loads of waste because they were like, the animals are not producing enough waste for us. Let's make these massive waste machines so we have more power.
I'm assuming you two know the stoned ape theory. Essentially, the stoned ape theory is when our ancestors came out the trees and began to walk across the plains in Africa, the natural thing they would have done is follow the herds of animals. Well, there's this mushroom called cubensis. People know it's like they're your golden teachers, your Hawaiian mushrooms. They basically grow really well in animal dung. And so the theory is at some stage, like our very early ancestors would have been picking these mushrooms and eating them and then having visionary effects. Now, if you start magnifying, now in like the modern society today, people are doing this to gain greater clarity or understanding. But if you start saying, well, what happens if we were doing that for like hundreds of thousands of years? Like, is that where this idea of human consciousness developed from, and how quickly? Not how quickly, but my knowledge on science can sometimes escape me. But I think the idea is the human brain had this huge growth spurt, right? And got really big really quickly, and everybody says well, that's kind of an anomaly. How did that happen? And so that's what birthed the stoned ape theory. So yeah, that's a Terence McKenna one who I referenced earlier. I think he came up with it after eating a lot of them, probably. Yeah.
So let's sort of switch from the ancient to the now, if we can. And mushrooms are definitely being more talked about in terms of treatments, in terms of benefits that they can bring to us mere humans, other than just eating them in a nice omelette. There's all the talk now about mental health support for depression. And let's talk about the joy side of things. I don't drink alcohol. I'd much rather be a friend with a plant instead. I'd feel that it's a much more joyful experience than alcohol can produce often. So what's your take on where mushrooms are in the world today?
So I think there's kind of a bit of a renaissance period happening with mushrooms. And my feeling is that we're actually at the tip of the iceberg with just how much they're going to be able to help modern society. And yeah, I think we really don't know anything. And there's this huge world is going to open up to us through the use and integration of mushrooms. And I don't mean just in a psychedelic term here. I mean, as an example, people are using it now to make compostable packaging. There's potential that they might be able to build houses out of mycelium. So the idea is you can create kind of obviously at the moment we live in this kind of culture which is very wasteful, right? Everything's kind of plastic. But with mycelium, you can begin to grow bio bricks and do all this kind of amazing stuff, like insulation as an example. You can use this as I said earlier with mycelium. So mycelium, all it needs is something to eat, and it will basically create almost like a block, if you will. So if I've got a Tupperware box and I fill it full of the food and I put the mycelium in there, it will create a block of mycelium. So people have been going well, we can insulate houses with that. or create packaging, or there's this huge world of things opening up where it feels to me like, first of all, they're going to be cultivated and they're going to begin to eat all of the oil spills and the trash and like really help us in that, but then they're also going to like take that another step and go, look, and we can help you help you create a greener society. We can help the soldiers who are suffering from PTSD, or people with inherited trauma, like we'll help them too. And it just seems like, and I'm a bit of like a mushroom enthusiast, as you mentioned at the beginning, but it seems to me like they have an answer for almost every question.
What's coming to me, and you said it earlier, but it's just so powerful, is this idea that they are the masters of living in partnership. And I feel like humans, like our trauma, our problems, our impact on the world is because we're not living in partnership with the world. It's because we're living in separation. And it's like, these are the masters of how to live in partnership, not just with an ideal world, not just like with the perfect conditions. Being in partnership in all conditions seems to be what the mushrooms just know how to do. And I'm like, if we're going to survive here, we need to learn from them about partnership.
That's a good point. They're not stressing out like, oh, there's too much rubbish. They're like, okay, we'll just start like transmuting this, and we're going to, like seeing opportunity. Like, okay, like we can just,
it's like being in partnership with the present moment, or being in partnership with what is there, and the alchemy coming from the partnership is what I'm getting from this activation or this episode. It's like the partnership is the alchemy.
I like Nick's point about it being the opportunity. It's the opportunity that's then created by that partnership that is the special magic that then happens, because it's not just a partnership, it then creates something. There's something extra that's created from that partnership, and it sees the opportunity.
Which, when you think about partnership, it's like even creation of human life only comes from partnership. Let's be honest, like creation happens out of partnership. And it feels like that's just, the mushrooms just know how to like partner with anything. And then like you say, Fiona, like out of it comes a new creation. And I feel like humans are the opposite of that knowledge. Like at the moment, we're living in isolation, or like in separation rather than in partnership. And that's why it feels so important to be, starting this, I guess, relationship with mushrooms, even if it's not the psilocybin ones, like you say, Nick. It's like, doesn't have, mushrooms. There's like the super 7, isn't there? The mushrooms that are really just good for your health.
When you said that, like, it just reminded me of, I feel like with humans, there's this kind of like, is it like a messiah complex where we kind of feel like we're top dog, and like, like it's in the Bible, and we have dominion over all like animals and all plants, and like it seems that we treat the world as if we have dominion over it. And mushrooms, like you say, if we start looking at the mushrooms as an example, we go like, oh wow, well these guys, like, they share their stuff out, but they also know how to create boundaries when things aren't going quite right, and they transmute this, and
how do they create boundaries?
So if you've ever like snapped like a broken log, if you've ever seen like a log cut in half, right, you might see sometimes there's like black lines running through the log. Have you ever noticed that? Or sometimes if you see like a bowl which is spun and you've got those like, it's almost as if someone's taken like a pen and drawn black lines all over it. What that is like, so before it's had any mushrooms, we'll call it like the green log has, like, say, fallen to the forest floor, and then a bunch of mushrooms have gone food, and they've all begun to grow on it. But as they've grown on it, they've started to meet each other, and they've gone, well, we can't mate with you, so how about you have that bit of food and we'll have that bit of food, and then they build this little wall just to protect themselves from each other, so that they kind of living in equilibrium within that piece of wood.
So they live peacefully. They also do like essentially nations peacefully.
They do, yeah. I mean, some people might argue that they have like chemical warfare. In my opinion, like, it's a bit of a human projection. I think they don't see things in that same sort of way. Another really interesting fact, actually, while it popped into my mind, is like, so you've got like this mycelium network, and it's connected to the roots of the forest, right? And so, as we all know, we've got evergreen trees like the pine, which are green all year round, and then we've got like the oak, where the leaves die off. It might be that the mycelium is passing nutrients between those two trees in order to help the oak sustain itself during the winter months. But it might, what they do is sometimes they will trade more nutrients, and sometimes the cost will be different, so they'll adjust. They're a bit like a human society in the fact that, like, if the nutrients have to go really far from one tree to another, well, maybe the oak has to pay a little bit more for it, whatever it's sending back. So they have these like crazy complex networks, which are actually like display like huge signs of intelligence. And they're working together, but like I say, they're working together, but they understand, like, if you're working double hard, well, you should be maybe rewarded.
You need more energy.
Yeah. It's like, and so
it's like a negotiation.
Yeah, exactly.
To say, I need a little bit more from you right now. Okay, well, if I do that, then I'm going to need a little bit more down the line. Okay, agreed. Off we go. It's quite incredible.
And it seems to me that, like, if humans took on some of these examples, so to speak, then maybe our cultures could learn something a little bit from it, of like, oh, actually, maybe we can share, or maybe we can deal with this pile of mess, or maybe we don't have, I don't know. It just feels that it's a very efficiently smart, quite like an intelligent way to run a species. And without even taking the psychedelics, just looking at the big overarching lessons, it seems like there's a lot we could learn just from seeing the way that they're set up.
Karila's brain, I can see, is just completely exploded right now.
Do you feel like they're prioritizing life force energy? Because that's what comes to me. I feel like they're prioritizing not the life force energy of the individual fruit, which is probably what we do, but they're prioritizing the life force energy of the mycelium network and the partnership that they are having.
Yeah, so because I listened to a lot of your earlier podcasts, it really got me thinking, like, what does life force mean to me? And I don't know if I got this opinion because I'm a yoga teacher as well. It might potentially be influenced by them, but I certainly feel like the mushrooms contributed it. But I sort of see life force as everything, really. It's just the infinite expressions which comes out of life in general. And so I think the mushrooms perhaps see it in a similar way, as I explained to you earlier. So we would see somebody dead as like lacking life force, but they see this opportunity to break down and share, and like, oh, we can transmute all of this, and it's more I think there's maybe less division in the way that they see something. But it's not something
it's interesting because it's hummingbird wisdom, isn't it? And both me and Nick are in the hummingbird stage of the medicine wheel, which is finding the magic and joy in all things. Like that's what the principle of that part of the medicine wheel is about. And I feel like that is totally embodied in the mushroom magic. It's like why, Fiona, you say you feel so much joy with the psilocybin is because there is something about this mushroom perspective of like, in that is energy, in that is something that can be transmuted, something that can be created, something, it's like, again, the joy, the magic and joy comes from the partnership itself, comes from the In a way, it's like finding the sacred or finding the energy in what is. That's what I'm hearing from this. Whether it's a dead tree, whether it's an apocalypse, whether it's the end of days.
Well, can I ask another question then, which is kind of related to that? Because we're all glowing with the positivity of the mushroom world. Is there an evil mushroom? Is there like a counterbalance to the joy? We talked about the fact that some might kill you. So I'm just going to ask the question, is there one out there that's up for destruction, world domination, and fuck everybody else? Is there an evil mushroom?
I hate a mushroom.
There was that TV series. What was it called? I forget, but it was about a mushroom which takes over, the cordyceps mushroom, which is the mushroom which infects ants, and then so it drops into an ant. And again, I'll slaughter the actual mechanics of it, but something like it drops into an ant, taps into its nervous system, makes the ant walk up to the top of a tree, at which point the ant, I believe, bites into the tree to like pin itself there, and then it grows a mushroom, dies as the mushroom grows out of it and fruits its spores. And
what? What?
This is a Marvel cartoon, a Marvel movie.
Another one which springs to mind, actually, which again will blow your mind, is there's this mushroom which is considered a delicacy in Eastern Europe, but it's also like known. So in Eastern Europe, they love mushrooms, right? Mushroom hunting is a big thing. My uncle is said to have eaten this mushroom, but it's considered a delicacy, but it also kills the most people. And the reason that is, and it's also famously the only one which has killed like a mushroom expert, or maybe, like one of the only ones which has ever killed a mushroom expert. And the reason is you can eat it, but at some stage the mushroom goes, you've had your fill, and then when you eat it, it changes its chemical composition and you die from it. And I don't know.
It literally metamorphosizes itself, and it's like, haha, I was a safe mushroom, now I'm not a safe mushroom.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. From my understanding, that's exactly how it goes down. Which just kind of seems, I don't know, maybe that's kind of seems slightly evil, like, oh, I'm so delicious, come, I'm your favorite.
But to me, that's just the mushrooms being like, see, you know nothing. You know nothing. We know how to metamorphosize ourselves. Like, you know nothing. We know everything.
Yeah.
Mushroom shapeshifter.
And it can be said, like, like some of the ways you die from eating, like the death cap is like notoriously a notoriously unpleasant death, where I believe you think you're going to die, make a full recovery, and then like really die like a few days later or something like that. And so, yeah, but I've found that mushroom in the wild, and when I sit next to that mushroom, I feel just as joyful as when I sit next to any of the others. Like, I'm certainly not gonna, like some people say you shouldn't even touch it. So like you just sort of, keep a very healthy boundary with the mushroom, but it doesn't feel to me like, having worked in this, putting my shamanic hat on, it doesn't feel like it's any more evil than, sitting with a liberty cap, which is a very well-known magic mushroom for those of your listeners who are unaware.
Such personality. It feels like there's a personality in each one. And I know I'm trying to stop drinking as much coffee, and I have to say I've created my own little blend of different mushrooms to have in the morning. And I do believe that it really gives me focus, gives me energy, gives me clarity. And I look forward to my morning cup. And I'm starting to bring a little ritual into it in the morning just to appreciate it even more. So there's definitely little ways that I feel that it's creeping into day-to-day life for everybody to be curious and to see what health benefits first and foremost they feel from it, before then kind of exploring other elements of the mushroom. It's got a good PR agent, whichever the mushroom is that works on its PR, because I'm sure it must have one. It's doing a good job.
The Mycelium network. Like it's just And what I think is beautiful about the Mycelium network, yeah, like they've got this master PR, like you say, like I feel like we haven't had a choice that mushrooms keep coming up in this conversation, because it does feel like it's like we're talking about life force energy, and the mushrooms are just like, you cannot talk about life force energy without talking about us. Like you cannot. We are the living, like, to me they are the living life force energy, and then in that is this thing of like, well, that's also about the alchemy then, isn't it? It's like the alchemy is the creation of life force energy in the soil, in it's
air,
the transmutation of life that self-sustains life. But there's also this thing that I kind of feel is like the mycelium networks are underneath us. It's like it's also holding us, like it's everywhere, isn't it? It's like it's like this great big net, like that is holding us that is upholding life,
That can I segue onto a little bit about soil health from there, because
yeah, please do.
One of the major challenges we're facing right now is that you've got essentially this depleted soil, and a lot of the reason, part of that is the fact that they continually rake it, right, which rips up the mycelium thread. They spread fungicides on it, and so they're killing the network, which binds the earth. It's like, imagine if it's like a net, right, around the earth, as you said, and it's holding the soil there, and it's a super highway of information where even if it's just a grassland, the grass can communicate with each other, or if it's a forest, it might like tear down one tree to allow new plant life to grow. And so you're essentially like, they're tearing and killing the network which holds the soil together. And this is where you start seeing these huge sandstorms in the US. This is more a problem in the US and the UK, but there's no reason we should be complacent about it. The Dust Bowl, yeah. Right, that's because they're basically like destroyed the mycelium network.
Which, the US has had dust bowls before. They had a dust bowl in the 1930s because of too much raking. So, like, you'd think humans might have learned to protect the network. But we haven't, because, yeah, we're not as intelligent as the mushrooms. Like, it is really important because, I've heard about the Dust Bowl in America, and like things stopped growing, like it was like fertile land went from fertile to beyond desert to toxic dust wind and nothing being able to grow, and people having to literally migrate away from land that had fed their ancestors for hundreds of years because people overraked the soil. That's what happened.
One of the things that my girlfriend knows more about this than I do, but one of the things that people are now doing is they're going to places where there is an established mycelial network. This is more in the rewilding community. So people are like now rewilding forests. What people do is they go to like an old forest and then they gather up some of the soil which will have the mycelial network in it, and then from there they can create what's called a liquid culture, right? A liquid culture is like a mycelial network in liquid, but because it's so micro small that you're never going to see a net or anything. And they'll dip tree roots in before they plant the tree, and then it's like you have a tree ready to go with the forest blueprint encodings and mycelial network. And in this way people are able to like rewild sections of land quicker than if they just plant. If you just plant, it'd be kind of like if you just plant the tree, it's like, well, I don't know, there's no like guidance. But when you take the mycelial root, it's like there's the blueprint. And so like it's this epic way that people and quite simple, right? All you need is
and it's like taking the code of the thriving forest and putting that blueprint down so that the unwell soil relearns, which is so interesting, because in the waterfall today we were tuning in about how the plants heal is through code. That's why I'm losing my shit. that how they do healing on each other, how they self-heal is through the coding.
So like if I
geometry.
do that, right, like surely there must be a way that you could respray the land where this dust ball exists. And like you take the mushrooms example, you can see it as an opportunity of like, how can we colonize a new mycelial network across this land in which mycelium, should go here and stuff like that. And then maybe there's an opportunity there if we can see it like if we can look at that land through the eyes of a mushroom. Because there's a lot of doom and gloom, right? Of like everything's lost and it's all going to go rule dooms, and I don't really buy into that. I don't buy into that idea at all. I think we can make quick, fast, intelligent changes, but we're just kind of unaware of what those are at this stage.
If we think like mushrooms.
We'll certainly have the capacity, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can't believe that we've been talking for nearly an hour already around mushrooms, and I might have to end on a bit of a dad joke, and that is to say that we probably need to wrap up now because we won't have much room for anything else today if we don't. I've been storing that dad joke up for episodes. But I feel like we do have much more room, actually, Nick, to talk more about this because it's so fascinating, the power and intelligence that lies with the Mycelium network. So I'm sure we will find a way to continue this conversation because I feel like we've only just touched the surface. Karila looks excited as well.
I would like to see. I'm going to just plant this seed or plant this blueprint. What if you came onto the Life Force Cafe, which is where people go deeper with our guests, and did a How to Think Like a Mushroom workshop?
Oh, so I've not heard of Life Force Cafe up until this very moment. So let's talk about that.
Let's talk about it. But I'm just planting that seed. Like I'm planting that seed, and I'm also like, do you want to come tomorrow to the waterfall? Because we're going back to the waterfall. If you're in Dartmoor, come. We'll go to the waterfall.
Sadly, but also fortunately, I'm on the other side of Dartmoor. I say fortunately because it's a really beautiful area that I'm on, but the waterfall's a good couple of hour drive for me.
Fair enough.
So I won't make it. But if you're ever down this way again, definitely let me know.
I will do.
Agile is like a very special place to me. Steeped
in to the mushrooms, apparently. It's apparently a spokes place for the mushrooms. I'd also like to ask you, who should we have on the show next?
Is there any like topics that you feel that you want covered specifically?
Just whatever's coming to you.
Whatever speaks to you.
Have you spoken to Charlotte out of interest?
Funnily enough, Susie recommended Charlotte, so you have to think of somebody else.
Really? Because I love astrologer Charlotte, but the Charlotte I love the most is the Charlotte who is the comedian Charlotte. So maybe you should think about that.
Susie recommended the comedian Charlotte, so go with the astrologer Charlotte.
She got there first. I'll have to listen to Susie's episode in the coming days. If you want to get more into the plant sort of world, like my partner knows a lot about plants and just knows.
We love a relationship, a partnership being. We've had a few people recommend their partner. We'd love to have your partner.
Yeah. She's more into the forage. She's very knowledgeable, basically, more about the foraging and the plants. I just know about mushrooms, and then I tap out when it comes to everything else. But she's got huge knowledge on everything else. I also have another friend who heavily into the mushrooms as well, and also a yoga teacher. She's fascinating, knows a lot more than me as well. I know a lot of mushroom people, so if you want to go, but maybe I should.
Let's go there. Yeah. Let's go into the money.
We might have to change the name of the podcast. May the mushrooms be with you.
May the mushrooms.
Yeah. Do a whole season on them probably. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Oh, well, please, will you do some introductions for us to your mushroom people, to your network?
Yeah,
Your Mycelium network.
well, we've got a beautiful
Fantastic.
WhatsApp group called Fungiphilia, so I'll post this podcast on there. And if any of your listeners want to be in there, where they talk about IDing, and it's a more foraging sort of podcast. But if they reach out, I'll see if I can get a link for you to put. I don't know if you can put it somewhere, or but for people who are interested in the day-to-day like mushroom foraging, that would be a good place, a good group to be like plugged into. Yeah. A lot of people if they've got confusion, they can just put a picture up and ask what this is, and people will try and help them.
Should I eat this?
The answer is always no.
The answer is usually
You don't know.
The answer is usually no.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much again, Nick, for your time today. It was fantastic. I'm off to read more about the beautiful world of mushrooms, and we hope to see you again soon.
Oh, thanks so much for the invitation. This is my first podcast as well, so I'm so grateful to you both for inviting me on. It felt super fun. All right.
Thank you so much. I am blown away. It's been amazing. Thank you so, so much. May the life force and the mushrooms be with us all.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, wasn't that interesting? Aren't they clever little things, our little fungi friends?
I'm mind blown.
I'd read the Entangled Life book last year, all about the life of this Mycelium network. And so I had a good sense of how, they really do rule the world and are so connected, but just the way that Nick presented it in terms of that partnership and, how much they are involved in life and in giving life through soil, through lots of different connections and partnerships. It was a really interesting way to hear that information.
I mean, and also the things they create. So, you kind of associate mushrooms with destruction, and being able to alchemize. But what he was saying about, them being able to create bricks, it's just mental.
Well, it's so interesting, because when we talk about mushrooms, and, to be honest, that's where my mind goes as well in terms of the psychedelic or psilocybin and kind of the magic mushroom side of things. But, when you start to think about the ability to be part of, sustainability and recycling and the composting capabilities, then, we should be talking about mushrooms should be one of the most important ingredients, or what's the right word?
I think we should replace our governments with mushroom councils, to be honest.
Some of them are, yeah. Some of them are right toadstools, so yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it? But
I think we should just be no more government, just do what the mushrooms do.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to just think like that, how they create community and live side by side, even though they're not compatible. They find a way to coexist that still is healthy for both species. It's really, I'm diving in to find out more about how they
and then just the nutty synchronicity. I mean, it does feel like the synchronicity. The mushrooms are also see, we've planned it all, we've networked it all. Like you say, they have the best PR team. They're just watch us go, humans.
Well, I was listening on my trip back from Australia. I was in Doha airport and I was listening to our Requited Reverb podcast while I was in Doha. And we start that because I often forget menopause. I forget what we're talking about sometimes. So excuse me if I do double down on some stuff, folks. But we talk at the beginning of that about how we both had a cacao mushroom experience, and then that's what you actually wanted to talk about. And so it does keep coming back to kind of play with us. I like the playfulness. I like the joyfulness. I like the mischievousness. There's something in that, isn't there?
Yeah, it's like they're having fun, you know, and they're like, come and have some fun.
It's gonna like play with you a little bit. So,
But also just such a big, for me, such a moving takeaway, in spite of the fun, is this thing of the perspective of like, whatever you are faced with, you have a choice to come into partnership with it. And if you come into partnership, you will get energy and something else will be created. And like, that is the takeaway that I got from this conversation, is like, doesn't matter what it is. The mushrooms have this, like, we are gonna be in partnership, and we are gonna make something beautiful and some life out of this. And like, that's just such a beautiful way to be, such a beautiful way to live, and apparently the way to survive the apocalypse. Many apocalypses.
Yes. Well, on that note, I will bid you farewell for this evening.
So much mushroom magic to you, my darling.
And have fun with your fairies the rest of this week. I'm sure we'll revisit that story over the next few episodes. So have fun.
Bye. We hope this conversation has topped up your life force energy. If it has, then please help us spread the life force. Like, share, subscribe, all of that. And may the life force be with all of us.